Greetings, friends. The meat factory where I've worked since August of 2021 laid us off at the end of January of this year. They said they'd be closed for 4 to 6 weeks, and I had to find a new job. I spent about a week looking, and by perusing the online sphere, especially ziprecruiter.com, I came across a phone number for an agency, and that phone number gave me connection to a man who hooked me up with a job at a furniture factory in the very north of the city where they manufacture office furniture, and I was put into a general labor capacity, which ended up being in the shipping department. So I'm basically, I guess they would call it like an order picker, or I don't know, someone who goes and takes an order for boxes, and then I have to find all the boxes, which is, should be a simple task. But anyways, we'll get into that. So I've been doing that for the past 6 weeks. I don't know now whether I'll return to the meat factory if it does indeed reopen. So part of this video, I'm going to compare the two jobs. And maybe it'll be interesting for anyone who has no skills like I do, because I studied geography and anthropology in university. So totally useless tasks. But it's okay, it's fun learning. It's fun getting yourself into the real world and learning from that. You got to look at it like life. You have to survive, but it should be fun. It should be interesting. You can't take it too seriously, otherwise the drudgery can kill you. And not all jobs are drudgery. In fact, the new job is more stimulating. So I've been working there for the past 6 weeks, since the beginning of February. How does this new job compare with the old one? Well, in terms of pay, it's about the same. Because I'm with the agency, with the option to work for the company after I complete about 940 hours, then I can apply to work for the company. But up until, for the time being, I'm with the agency. They pay minimum wage in Canada, Canadian dollars, 15 hours. It's low, but it is guaranteed hours of, well, not guaranteed, but generally it's a 9-hour day. So it's actually more hours than I was working at the meat factory, which was only an 8-hour day. This new job at the furniture factory is from 8 a.m. to 5:30, but sometimes they have us stay till 6 p.m. And I've worked till 6:30 p.m. on 2 or 3 occasions in the last 6 weeks. So you're getting paid time and a half for that. You're getting overtime pay. There's more overtime opportunities at the office furniture factory than previously. The meat factory was like 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. pretty regularly. So it was an 8-hour day as opposed to now a 9-hour day. The pay at the meat factory was a bit better at like $17.50, but I was a company employee, so they were skimming about the same amount of money. So going directly into your bank account was like about the same amount of money as $15.50, but then you had benefits. But then I looked at what the agency pay stub was, and then they were taking vacation pay too. They were taking some of that $15.50 too. I just haven't had any time to even contact these people. I contacted the accounting department with the agency. They're slow in getting back to me. They don't answer all my questions. I wanted to see my pay stubs for the full month, for every week, so I could compare my hours. They only gave me one at a time. So whatever, it's silly stuff, but it is a good idea to try and keep on top of this stuff. But basically what I'm saying is the pay is more or less the same as it was at the meat factory, but they're giving me more hours, and they're also giving me a 5-day work week. So I'm like getting more money now than I was making before, because the meat factory since June of 2022 was only giving us 4 days of work a week, and that's not accounting for the 2-week layoff around Christmas time, and before the present indefinite layoff that began on the very end of January. So they were only giving us 4 days of work a week, which I guess is nice if you're tired and you want to have another 3-day weekend, well, at least another day during the week, because they would give us Tuesdays off. We'd be in on Monday and then have Tuesday off and then work Wednesday to Friday. And then they were always saying, oh, we hope to return to 5-day schedule, which most people wanted because they wanted to make more money. That day never came, so we're still waiting for that to this day. So it's more regular at the furniture factory. The furniture factory is owned by a billionaire, from what I understand. It's a giant factory, so I'm more cynical about the big factories, the big machine system, but in terms of financial security and reliability, I have more confidence that some companies are just maybe too big to fail is the wrong word because that implies government bailouts, but it gives you more confidence that they won't have to lay people off indefinitely or unexpectedly, because the meat factory where I was working was a small operation. It was at most a medium-sized factory. It was like there was a much bigger meat factories than the place where I worked. So, and I don't know if it's just the history of the company. I know the meat factory had shut down before in the past. They'd been shut down by government regulators for sanitary violations and this kind of thing. But it had always reopened after months or a year, and then from what I understood, under the same ownership. A certain ethnicity owns both the furniture factory and the meat factory, a certain ethnic group. And that shouldn't be surprising, but it's kind of funny. It's just a funny detail. Length of commute. Now, this is one of the biggest selling points of the meat factory. It was like a few minutes from my apartment. It was incredibly convenient. And the agency that originally found me the meat factory before I was hired at the meat factory, that was through an agency too. They specifically found me something which was close to me, which I was grateful for. And it made a huge difference because I could get up at 5:45 in the morning, eat breakfast, be at work for 7 a.m., and then be home by 4 p.m. And then you could, in the summertime, you can still go biking, you can meet up with some friends. Sometimes you'd feel more exhausted, so you wouldn't want to do that. But certainly in the warmer time of the year, that would still give you a portion of your day that you could enjoy the outdoors. So that was nice about the meat factory. It was so close. The furniture factory is much further. It is about more than 10 kilometers from where I live. And I can take my e-bike there when the weather's favorable, even in the winter if it's not snow or ice or too cold. I was doing it in early February before the weather got cold again and snowy. I could take my e-bike there in less than 40 minutes. The express bus can get you there in less than an hour, but you still have to, that involves walking for at least 15 minutes from the bus stop. I don't have a car. If you had a car, it'd still take you half an hour to get there, or at least 25 minutes. Depending on from where you're leaving in the city. So it's not, that would help. But, if I got a better e-bike that could go 40 kilometers an hour or 50 kilometers an hour, which may not be legal, but you can get them, then, and a more comfortable e-bike with bigger tires, and, I would probably have to invest more in safety equipment, then I could probably get there in half an hour. At least in the morning. If you try to go there, going home is an entirely different situation because there's people on the sidewalk, there's more traffic on the road. So whether you're taking the road or whether you're skipping onto the sidewalk, you're going to be slowed down nonetheless. And the particular road that leads to this factory, especially as it gets into the northern regions of the city, starts to become like a developing country in terms of the road quality, in terms of the potholes. And when you're taking the bus through stretches of this road, the bus is continuously banging and rattling, not just a little jostling, like it's continuously being assaulted by potholes. So the length of the commute means that I am getting up basically the same time of the day, around 5:45. I have to be up by 6 a.m. And I'm getting home just after 7 p.m. if I'm relying on transit, if I'm relying on the bus. I'm leaving the house by 6:55 a.m. or 6:50 a.m. to get to the furniture factory, which is just essentially the same time as for the meat factory, but I'm getting home literally 3 hours later in the day. And then I have to make dinner and then get ready for bed. So I have a lot less time from working in this current job. So the meat factory wins out in that category. It wins out big time. Big time. And when I first thought that I would be going to this furniture factory, I was thinking that the distance would probably mean that I wouldn't hold on to this job. It just seemed a bit too far. Now, in terms of the tasks, there are more limited tasks at the meat factory. I was just doing packaging. And if you're doing something more complicated, like cutting meat, trimming meat, generally you do one piece at a time or maybe a few different pieces. And then as you develop skills, and I didn't go into this capacity, but if I was to return to the meat factory in good conscience, I would eventually have to try cutting meat because they would pay you more money for that. But I was just doing packaging during the time I was there because it was something secure, something I could do. It was exhausting, but it was simple, and there was no mental stress, just physical exhaustion. Sometimes, often, because they would push us and they would work us like donkeys at the meat factory, but you were doing repetitive tasks again and again. But you weren't running around, walking around. You were generally standing in a refrigerated environment, which you could get used to it. That wasn't the worst thing after a while. You could adjust to that, but you're standing there, so it's not too bad in terms of wearing out your legs and stuff because you don't have to run around like. But you are. It could be overall. It's more of a draining day. I think it doesn't matter what capacity you're working in the meat factory. If it's the kill floor upstairs, which is a different section. If it's deboning. If it's in the shipping section, especially if it's in the shipping with those guys carrying those heavy boxes, everyone's going to be significantly tired at the end of the day. Maybe not like wrecked, but depending on the day, to whatever degree, you will feel tired at the end of the day. Now at the furniture factory, it's not like that. The tasks are not so repetitive. The tasks are more varied. I mean, I have to find the boxes. I have to get the boxes, find them, which involves a lot of communication because you constantly have to ask people for help. It's very humbling because it forces you to constantly ask people for help. And they have to help you because that's part of their job is making sure that you find the right boxes. But it's humbling in that sense. So moving the boxes is usually not too hard. It's not like you have to be any extremely physically fit to do this job. You don't. I'm a strong person, and neither is really anyone I work with. We're just average guys, and some of my coworkers are short. Like my Sri Lankan friend, who I got a job at this furniture factory too, because he was with me at the meat factory. Like he's pretty short. He's a short guy, but he can do the job. Anyone can do the job if you use common sense and you ask someone for help. Sometimes you have to do heavy lifting. Sometimes that can injure you. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. The tasks involve more problem solving at the furniture factory because there's different orders, there's different lists of boxes. Some of these are small boxes, some of these could be like 50 huge boxes, like pieces like hutches and pedestals and tabletops and panels and boxes for chairs, chair supports, fabrics, but mostly like we're talking wood, plastic, some metal. And all of this can be heavy. Some of the boxes are semi-assembled furniture pieces which are hollow on the inside, might not be so heavy. Some of them are like box on box and box of like solid wood panels or tabletops. Those can be extremely heavy. But generally you don't always have to lift things physically. More than half the time you're using the pump track, which is like a jack on wheels, like a big fork, like mechanical. Anyone can learn to use it in 15 minutes. And then you just get better. They have an electric pump track which runs on, obviously it's electric, so it has a battery. And I'm not authorized to use it. I was able to experiment with it the other day. It wasn't that difficult. I'm sure I'll be able to use it before long. That's like a predecessor to becoming an actual forklift operator because we have to operate in conjunction with forklifts when we need something from the rack, which is on the second level or higher. Obviously you're going to need a forklift for that, so you have to flag them down, and that's their job to help you. So everyone has to work together and communicate, but the communication is actually often not the best at the furniture factory. That's something I discovered early on. So the tasks are different, but there is generally the tasks are more varied and more stimulating at the furniture factory. But with time that'll become drudgery because you'll be doing the same kind of thing over and over again. But there is more variation. There is more going around finding things, and it has been difficult. And I've gotten 80%, 85% of the way there. I've gotten kind of the swing of it, but my goodness, the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even 4 weeks, even still, there was no employee training. to learn how to do your job at the furniture factory. Unlike at the meat factory where you had to be trained, like not technically trained in a course, but you had to have someone there with you showing you how to do something. And if you weren't doing something right, you'd be told about it right away. And that's common sense, and that was straightforward, and that's good. So there was more of like basic training in the meat factory because there had to be. But in the furniture factory, well, it's a bit different. Everyone's off on their own doing their thing, and start with the small orders, and then you slowly get the hang of it. But learn on the job. I mean, learning on the job is common to both situations and most jobs. But in this situation, the furniture factory is like just learning a culture, learning a language, reading the order lists, understanding or taking hints, taking clues from what is in the order list. What are the dimensions of the product? Where might it be located? What's the name of the product? There's different categories like is it licensed? Is it a panel? Is it seating? Is it vice versa? I still don't know what vice versa implies. Is it Linak? Linak, L-I-N-A-K. That's like heavy boxes. I don't know if it's for posts or table legs or the rectangular heavy box. Even the cardboard is a certain color. Vice versa, I don't know what that implied. It might have been something else, like a category, but there's a certain area of the factory where they put vice versa. And I just had to discover that on my own. No one told me this. There was never any like basic rundown of like, these are things you need to know, which is fine, learn on the job, but don't complain if the employee doesn't know what he's doing or doesn't know how to find something because you didn't train your employees, you just let them learn on the job, which that happens, okay? But so it's a bit silly. The furniture factory is silly in many ways, but then again, many jobs are silly, and there were silly things about the meat factory too. So that's how it goes. But I do feel that the job is overall much more laid back, the new job. It's much more relaxing. Not relaxing, there's more mental stress, but the physical stress is overall low. There are only times when you might be physically exerting yourself, occasionally lifting items, sometimes wrapping skids, if there's small boxes on a skid, you don't want them to move around in the trailer or the shipping container, so you wrap them with it. It's basically like giant cling wrap. It's the exact same thing. It's a giant cling wrap, but you go around it in a certain way, go around it from the bottom to the top and over, using that. And then you have to do paperwork. The paperwork is actually kind of extensive, but usually the same thing. The only main differences is if you're doing a regular order or if it's what they call pickup. Like, is there a middleman involved? Is there like a middleman trucking company coming to pick up the order or multiple orders and move it to the customer? Or is the customer coming themselves? In which case, it's a pickup order and you don't have to do as much of the paperwork, but you do have to show up to meet the customer and then deliver the boxes to the correct loading area, to the correct door where the trailer or whatever vehicle will back in on the outside. And then you just have to make sure that they see that the correct boxes are there. But how are they to know if they have the correct boxes? I don't know. I didn't pack the boxes. I'm just giving you what is in the right sales order. And this is the corresponding number, and it's the right number of boxes. And if you have more questions, then I can get my supervisor. But I can't provide you more details. But my job is, they call it staging an order. It's very simple. You meet the customer, you bring the boxes to them, and then they move it in, and then you get them to sign and print, and then you make sure there's a date. And then you give them the white copies and the yellow copies, like carbon paper, leaves an impression. The yellow copies we keep, and that's simple. And they got me to do that because I guess I'm a native English speaker, and maybe they would rather have me doing it. I'm just a minimum wage agency worker along with all these other guys, but my other coworkers are like Sri Lankan guy who barely speaks English, my other Sri Lankan friend who, his English is not so much better, and there's very other people who could do the staging, but I'm just saying perhaps because I can speak English clearly, perhaps they chose me to stage these. I almost found it annoying because I don't want to do customer service, this is moving in the direction of customer service, which I don't like. I don't want to do that. That's one of the reasons I like factory jobs. Is you do something simple, you do real work, and that's, I mean, not that this isn't real work, but no, overall it's been fine. There's more varied tasks. You feel less drained at the furniture factory, so it takes more of your day, 9 hours, but then you might have the opportunity for overtime. But overall, I kind of like it better than the meat factory. There are annoying things. Like I said, the quality of communication was terrible. It's a lot of Sri Lankans, Indians, Asians, not so many Mexicans or Jamaicans like there were at the meat factory. But not that implies anything, but like the big boss, my direct supervisor is Sri Lankan. He's the one who's like on the ground telling me stuff, and for all intents and purposes is my boss. But then he's not my boss. If there's anything important, then you got to talk to the shipping office guy who almost never talks to us and is like not a very happy looking guy. And he's I don't want to get into ethnicity in case anyone sees this video and then flags it down, but whatever. I don't have to stay at this job forever, but just different ethnicity, and then the big boss is Indian. He's the boss of all the picking and packing section of this part of the factory. And I haven't even seen the whole factory. It's like maybe 100 meters wide by 300 meters long. I haven't even seen what's going on down in all the rest of the building. I hear sounds. I hear sounds that sound like fireworks. I hear drilling sounds. Sometimes they might ask you to do general labor here, but very occasionally, like one time I was punching plastic for an hour and a half. I was taking plastic strips, which I think they use as like rails for doors. In the drawer units, they have to have little channels for the wheels to move in. So I was taking those and putting them into like a press, like a kind of like a vise and a press, and then you press these two buttons, and the thing would go down. It makes a popping sound, and it's cut out a little V-shaped, U-shaped, denting in this piece of plastic, and then you do the same thing on the other side, and then you throw it in a box, like some simple manual labor. And I was watching the plastic filings accumulate like on the ground in front of me, and I'm like, they're fairly solid, they're falling to the ground. And I was thinking, like, am I inhaling plastic right now? So would I want to do that job repeatedly? I don't know. I forgot to add one thing about the illness potential. Like, for example, in the meat factory, it's a refrigerated environment. It takes more of your energy during the day to stay warm. You're doing more physical labor, more exertion. Sometimes you can sweat. If you get sweaty, you can get a rash, or you can get drained more from when the cold seeps into your clothing again. So there's that. Not so much threat of actually cutting yourself. There were slippery surfaces, but I never slipped on anything. I never saw anyone slip. There's hot water that can scald you. I did see one accident where someone got scalded by hot water because we use it to clean off the knives, sometimes to sanitize your gloves. And I did once I almost scalded myself on several occasions by putting my hands in the hot water for too long. You're not supposed to put your hands in there, but in practice, it is easy. It works effectively, but got to be careful there. But not really so much. It was more like the knives weren't sharp enough when I was briefly cutting meat. But yeah, you can see there's always going to be some potential for maybe injury, but not necessarily like a terrible accident. But in the furniture factory, it's the same. It's like there's no imminent threat of any terrible accident unless when you don't trust the racks that they put these heavy boxes on. But you have to be careful when the forklifts are bringing things down. Obviously, stay away from the forklift when it's doing its thing. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward, like any other sort of job environment that's doing a real job, as opposed to sitting in an office doing just like mental stuff. That any sort of real job is going to involve some basic threat of accident or injury from the real world. But there is one thing I noticed in the furniture factory, which that there is some level of cardboard dust, or maybe it's wood dust or something. Now they keep it fairly well ventilated, almost to the point where, and this may be because of the dust, the air is dry, it dries you out more quickly. You have to drink water more frequently. the furniture factory is dry like a desert, and it dries out your skin, and there's dust that it didn't make me sneeze, it didn't make me cough. I don't see the dust. Well, sometimes I can see build up places, but I noticed the urge to, what's it called, like, when you have to clear something from, I don't know if it's your sinuses or wherever, you feel something and you gotta go. That feeling? It's kind of gross, but I'm trying to describe. I've had that from time to time, actually, almost, predictably. It hasn't caused me pain or anything, but it is something, I'm a little, I do note that. I do have my eye on that. But overall, I got sick more frequently at the meat factory. I don't mean majorly sick, but I caught colds more frequently there. And I don't think it's because you're around other people necessarily. I don't necessarily believe in all that germ or virus theory. I just think it's because the job is more exhausting on your system, partly because of the cold, and it just drains you more, and then you're more susceptible to not flushing out toxins from your body. But so anyways, furniture factory isn't perfect either, but it does seem to be a bit more healthier with certain exceptions. That's the furniture factory. I don't know what else is going on there. But it's mostly manufacturing labor, and it doesn't seem like it would be much more high paying than the shipping labor, because I don't think any of it is too skilled from what I've seen. Guys are packaging things, but again, I haven't seen all what's going on. This is a giant company, and the building I described is only one of several which are in this area, and some of the shipping is just going to like different buildings around, and the whole section of the city has like furniture related industries and the furniture stores, and there's also a giant petroleum depot right near where I work, giant silos of gasoline, I think, and then giant double tanker trailers, where they have like two giant cylinders attached, and it's like that's next to me on the road as I'm waiting for the light to change or walking to work or on the bus, and you just look, and a few feet away is this giant tanker, and I'm just thinking like if this thing ever like sparked, like I would be incinerated. Like it's an uneasy feeling. Development of marketable skills. This is something in which the meat factory actually wins out, because you have a potential to make $24 an hour if you have at least a few years of experience, and maybe significantly more experience than that, as a skilled butcher, because you learn to do certain cuts, then you learn to do more complicated cuts, but that's pretty much the ceiling of the wage there. I don't know about the kill floor. The kill floor is more harsh conditions. They might pay you a little bit more, but not much, probably more than that. That's if you have, put in your years in the butcher's trade. That is a marketable skill. It's not like the highest paying job, but it is something that you could apply at different places. If you ever lost that job, you could find a job at another meat factory as a butcher, which at least one of my coworkers did that. Although they're making him work 45 minutes more per day and not more break time, and he says it's draining, so he might want to have more of a chill day, at least less work. So that is a marketable skill, which I'm not really getting the marketable skill at the furniture factory. I'm learning the culture of the company. I'm learning how to use a pump track, and potentially the electric pump track or whatever that machine is called could be a mild inkling of a skill. Some potential for, if you get your forklift license, then maybe they could pay you more. And I don't know if you work for the company, I don't know if they're going to pay you much more than minimum wage, maybe $1 or $2 more. But then they're skimming for benefits anyways, so you're probably making a similar amount of money cash in hand, but you would get benefits. Presumably. I'm assuming it's not unionized at the furniture factory. The meat factory was unionized. And the union did a little bit for us, but not much really. So I have no favorable opinion of unions, but I'm not against unions either. They can help, they can not help, it's a case-by-case situation, but I'm not too excited about unions overall, but the company tries to screw you over as well, so do what you can do, I guess. yeah, quality of communication better at the meat factory. I mentioned that because you have to be. It's more of a camaraderie environment too. It's a more positive environment because you have to be on the same page because you've got like 30 plus guys, and some women, but mostly men in a more smaller space, doing harder work on their feet for more of the day, at least more actual minutes of the day, where communication is essential, and that does lead to more of a group spirit, which can be a good thing, and that's certainly lacking in the current environment that I'm in. I mean, certainly people know each other and there's an environment at the factory, but we're much more isolated. Even in the shipping section, there's only about 6 or 7 of us. Maybe a few guys who can do the forklift thing, guys who've been there for many years, and then the new guys who are agency workers like myself. But we're all doing the same essential thing of finding the orders, moving the orders, and then doing the paperwork and loading the trailer. Yeah, we have to load the trailers. That's the other thing. We find the orders, we do the paperwork, and sometimes, but not every day, maybe only one day a week, but maybe sometimes multiple days in a row. It depends on how busy the season is, from what I've heard, but that's the extent to which you might have to load a trailer, which is not always too complicated. But that's the numbers of people we're working with. We're often off on our own, doing our own things, but you do have to ask people to help you. So it does involve some cooperation, but that's not enough to have really a high camaraderie sort of situation. We're not all doing the same kind of work, whereas all the people in the meat cuttings and the trimmers and they're all doing this related work all in one area. Even the packaging guys, we're all working together. That's much more unified, and perhaps not a coincidence that it would become unionized, as opposed to the current situation is where you've got different tasks over a much bigger building, much more spaced out, and often you can be on your own in the aisle looking for things and wasting time. Like, not purposely wasting time, but I was amazed, and I still am amazed at how easy it is to waste time in this furniture factory, because they haven't made it clear how to find these boxes, and often they put them in the wrong area or an area that doesn't make sense. There's not often a clear rule as to why this was put here. And sometimes they don't even have it ready yet. Sometimes actually the order comes out to us and I go looking for the boxes and they haven't actually delivered the correct boxes yet. And there was even an occasion yesterday where the product hadn't even been made yet. And it was already on the order list. It was item number 24. Item 24 didn't exist. And there's also times when they get things wrong that we have to correct. We have to number, sometimes they list items in the order list that don't exist, like 5 and 6. I had to write "do not exist" on the order sheet. So I'm getting into minutia here, but it's like items 5 and 6 do not exist. So these little things that, if you're not trained to, this could get very annoying to you. And the funny culture of this culture, it could all start to make you annoyed. But I just tune it out. And if someone's not giving me a clear work-related task, and they seem to be just saying something silly to me, or like the meaning is not clear, I just dismiss it in my head as this is silliness, and I'm not gonna react to this. One of the reasons it's more relaxed is because people go for break early. The break is the same schedule: 15 minutes in the morning, half hour for lunch, 15 minutes in the afternoon. It's the exact same at the furniture factory as at the meat factory. The difference is that people go for breaks like 10 minutes early, at least 5 minutes early. Now, sometimes they may be in a task that they're trying to finish, so it doesn't always go that way. But I consistently see people outside my section, all around all the packing section, like I see them putting stuff in the microwave at 12:20 p.m. Like I see them sitting down at 12:22 p.m. The break is from 12:30 to 1 p.m. So 5-10 minutes before the break, they're already getting out their food and sitting down. And then this is before the buzzer. The buzzer will go at 12:30 to let you know that it's break time. So that's more relaxed. But if you, at the same time, if you show up at 8:05 a.m. in the morning instead of 8 a.m., well, then that's a problem. Because, hey, do you know when this job starts? It starts at 8 a.m. So the big boss corrected me there. But hey, if you could go, part of the reason is people go to the bathroom before the break. In the bathroom, you have to walk a little bit. to one side of the building, so I understand that. You want to have your break time just for you sitting down, not for you being in the bathroom. So I like that about the furniture factory. I'm just saying that there's it's a silly culture there. As my supervisor says, he says there's a dirty culture here. He says it's dirty. I don't know what the backstory is. I don't really want to know. He says funny things to me that I don't even fully understand, that kind of rub me the wrong way sometimes. I injured my back at the furniture factory. Actually, this is something that, very similar pattern. When I started at the meat factory, I injured myself within 2 weeks. In that case, it was tendonitis in the shoulders from pulling strips of fat off of a flank steak, which became like a knife-like pain, which prevented me from continuing in that job. But then I was able to do packaging, and I just stayed in packaging because it was a bit physically easier, although exhausting. But then similar pattern. I go to the furniture factory, start getting the hang of the job, but then suddenly on the second Friday that I'd been doing this job, at the conclusion of 2 weeks at this job, at the 10th day, the 10th work day that I had been there, on that day, it started out all right, but as the day went on, I got these back pains in the lower back, and it got worse and worse and worse. And then at the end of the day, it was painful to walk. It was literally difficult to walk without sharp pain. And that continued for a week. I thought I would be finished. I thought there's no way I can continue at this job. But I forced myself to do it. I even came to work on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, and I told my supervisor, I said, well, I guess I have to see a doctor. And I was basically trying to tell him, like, I guess I can't do this job. Like, thanks for teaching me what you knew. Too bad, I'm sorry it didn't work out, but I guess I'll just get my things and go. Or maybe I'll talk to the boss, the big boss, and see if there's something else I can do here, but I can't do this. But then he just, before I had the chance to say those words, he was like very enthusiastic, and he's like, oh, well, you have to do this, you have to do that, and I just went along with his. He made a positive impression on me, and I was like, in my head, I was like, you know what? All right, I'll tough it out here, and we'll see. I was afraid that I would be making my back worse, because if you have a lot of pain, you can potentially be making things worse by forcing yourself to work through them. So I wouldn't give any advice, but in my case, I decided to tough it out, and that week nothing changed. It didn't get worse, but it didn't get better. And I was still limping around. Everyone could see that I was limping around. And then, so I went to the doctor, and then he prescribed me a muscle relaxant for bedtime, and then anti-inflammatory twice a day. And he said that I had a strained back. So the medicine actually, I didn't have any confidence that the medicine would help me, but evidently it did help me. And I took it for 2 weeks, and I still was a little iffy. But the back has more or less gone back to normal. Now, it may not be 100%. Maybe I should still be careful, but I can walk normally without pain, at least for now. So who knows? Every week you go to this job, even at the meat factory, every week, you never know what can happen. And I don't necessarily mean like a terrible accident. I mean just like you never know when something could start in your body that starts to cause you pain and can threaten your basic capability to perform the simple functions or whatever the crucial functions of your job are. If it's bending down or picking something up or you're walking around. I was having trouble walking from the bus stop to the factory. But then somehow when I'm in the factory, then you feel better, you feel more confident, you can get through the day. But then at the end of the day, walking back to the bus stop can barely get there. It was not a fun place to be in, but somehow I got through it and I'm still there. So it's like clinging on. And like by all accounts, I shouldn't be working there. I was thinking there at the end of the third week that I'd been there, when my back was still messed up, I was thinking like at least earlier that week, on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, I'm thinking, well, there's probably like a 20% chance of me continuing in this job. Like this job is basically over. Like that was my confidence level then, but I'm still there, and so overall, yeah, I pretty much. Getting the hang of it, I guess. But the last category is like, what is the real potential for advancement? I sort of was talking about that earlier. I mean, in the furniture factory, there might be some potential for advancement if you get your forklift license, but otherwise you have to become a supervisor, which can be hard and take many years and maybe comes with a lot more stress. Or perhaps you learn some other skill which could help you in some other function in the factory that I don't know of. But you might say that you've got my foot in the door, so then may ask about other things. I don't know. So not necessarily much potential for advancement, but it is at least a stable job, and it's not overly exerting. And there is more potential for advancement in the meat factory industry, at least to a certain ceiling, where you have a marketable skill. Now, maybe you could say forklifting that's a skill that you at least the capability you can put that on a resume. So maybe that's a skill, but being a skilled butcher, I'd say that's more of a marketable, developed skill than anything I'm dealing with right now. Yeah, one guy I talked to at the furniture factory, he said that he started in shipping and now he's in packaging, so presumably he's paid more. And he says that you can like listen to a headset all day long. And one of my coworkers does this. This Sri Lankan guy, he's just like on this headset all day long. I guess he talks to his wife all day long. He's a good guy, a bit odd, a bit strange. Sri Lankans are strange people. They're good people, but they are kind of strange. He's just on this. He's on his headset. But if you have your phone, you can't have your phone out. Oh, don't be on your phone. Oh, but people on their headsets. Oh yeah, you're on your headsets. Oh, go for break 10 minutes early. Yeah, put something in the microwave 10 minutes before lunch break. That's fine. Oh, but show up at 5 minutes after 8 a.m. when you're technically supposed to start. Oh, if show up 5 minutes late. Oh, well, that's a problem. That's just so those funny, ridiculous things. That has been annoying to me at this place. But then again, what job doesn't have that to some extent? Hasta luego, amigos.